I loved telling stories when I was a little girl. Stories about wild and fantastical adventures, where animals and children were living in a world that took shape inside of my imagination. As an only child, my stories were my secret friends. When I was about 8 years old, I wrote a story and I gave it to my teacher as my homework. He was my favorite teacher. He had this blonde curly hair, red beard, and he always wore a brown corduroy jacket. I was so excited, I could barely wait to hear what he thought. When he gave me back my story the next day, he told me it was beautiful, even romantic. And it had almost brought tears to his eyes. Oh, wow, I was so proud to think that my story almost made my favorite teacher cry. In that moment, I knew I'd found my calling. And then he added, however, that's not what we do here. We don't make up things. And he turned around and walked away. There I was, in front of the whole class. It felt as if the room disappeared and I was floating in a space of nothing. Because of that moment, because of that day, I stopped creating stories and I stopped writing. And for a long time after that, I didn't think of myself as a creative person. Not even when I was attending design school, or when I was working in marketing and creating advertising campaigns, or when I was a lingerie buyer for a department store, or when I was developing retail concepts and merchandising guidelines for a fashion company, and not even when I was designing stores and showrooms for famous clothing designers. Still then, I didn't think of myself as a creative person, because I did not feel creative. But the issue here, however, isn't whether we're creative or not. The issue is that we stop believing that we are. We're all born creative. It's innate in us to explore and look for solutions. It's how we have evolved over thousands of years. And our imagination is a unique skill that we all have as human beings. And our curiosity is with us from the beginning. That's how children learn about life. They ask why over and over and over again to understand the world around them. When I was a kid, I would ask silly questions like, why is a rock called a rock? Why is it not called a glass? These are not questions we can answer, but it's the act of asking them that opens up something new inside of us. So, in 2001, after both my parents died of cancer just about a year apart, and I was told it was no longer a matter of if, it was now a matter of when I was going to get cancer too. I decided to leave my career as a fashion executive, and I started asking some deep questions of myself. Not just what's the meaning of life, but how can I take charge of my health? What do I want to do with my life? What will inspire me to live fully engaged for the rest of it, and why would it matter? It was the act of asking these questions that opened me up to my creative nature again. And it reconnected me with that little girl inside longing to be nourished. So for the past 15 years now, I worked with people, helping them change their relationship with food by reconnecting them with why they eat and how it makes them feel. And what I consistently see is that at the end of the day, we don't eat based on counting calories. We eat to feel nourished. And as emotional beings, it's natural that we seek to find pleasure and avoid pain. However, when we use food as noise to drown out the inner critic that tells us that we cannot be who we are, or when we snack to distract ourselves from our fears or to drown our emotions that tell us to be afraid of who we are, or when we face a deadline and we push ourselves into survival mode by not eating all day because we dare not take a break, or when we are ahead or in front of a problem, we stay glued to the computer instead of taking a walk. We don't even stop for a glass of water or to take a breath. and we skimp on sleep so that we can keep going and going and going and going. That is not how we feed our creativity. If you were an athlete, would you say, I don't have time to eat, drink water, take a break, or sleep because I'm training for a competition? No. And even though we may not be athletes here, our bodies are still our tool every day at work. And food is not just fuel for our bodies. Food is how we fuel life. Studies have shown that creative people have a higher level of serotonin, but they don't eat that way. Or they're not born that way, sorry. They eat that way. So they are not born that way. They eat that way, right? Because serotonin, even though it's a brain neurotransmitter, 90% of it is produced in the gut. And serotonin is our well-being hormone. It helps us feel calm, centered, and happy. And we boost serotonin production by eating carbs, but not the sugar cookie candy kind, the good complex carbs from whole grain and vegetables. We also need dopamine. Dopamine helps us feel engaged and on, and we get dopamine when we're eating protein. And dopamine is an important brain chemical for feeling motivation, making decisions, and mastering our attention. And then there's cortisol. Cortisol. Cortisol is responsible for our sense of focus, but it's also our stress hormone, better known as fight and flight. So cortisol can help us perform under pressure. But when we boost up on coffee to get more energy, we also kill our ability to be open and curious because it also triggers anxiety. So a little bit of coffee can help you direct your thoughts when you're feeling overwhelmed and tired, but too much will narrow the perspective, cause the jitters, suppress serotonin production, and have you struggling to access your creativity because under stress, we're driven by instinct rather than inspiration. So mastering stress is critical for creativity. It's also why many artists make it an essential part of the creative process to go for walks. Our creative juices start flowing when we let the mind wander. It's probably also why we tend to get some of our best ideas when we least expect it, like when we're driving or in the shower and we cannot take notes. Right? Try that. So the elusive nature of creativity can often feel as if we need luck to get a good idea, like catching a rare butterfly. And actually, luck and creativity do have something in common, but it may not be what you think. I tend to find a lot of four-leaf clovers, but it's not that I'm more lucky than other people. It's that I trained my eye to notice them. I look for patterns among the clovers, and the four-leaf ones stick out as irregular. Can you see it? I also find a lot of five-leaf clovers. Once I found one, I was a believer, and I started looking for them. At some point, I was wondering, is there such a thing as a six-leaf clover? There is. I found one. So now that you're going to start looking for clovers, let me let you in on a little secret. If there is one four-leaf clover, there's usually more. That's how I've ended up with as many as 18 all at once. Research shows that unlucky people are simply so because they're not noticing what's right there in front of them. Because they're simply not looking for it. Yes, there were four-leaf clovers in there. Psychologist Richard Wiseman sums up the 4 traits of lucky people. They look for opportunity, they listen to their intuition, they assume they'll find something good, and if they don't, they'll make something good from it anyway. He also found that anxiety causes people to miss out because they're not noticing the unexpected. So noticing the unexpected is what makes us lucky. But as it turns out, it's also what makes us creative. Research has shown that a crucial trigger of creativity is indeed the experience of something unusual and unexpected. I love the principle of wabi-sabi. It's the Japanese art of creating without perfecting. It's about noticing what's real about something and using the unexpected by implementing it in the design. It creates an aesthetic that's beyond what the eye sees. It's felt by our consciousness. You can compare it to explaining what chocolate tastes like to someone who has never tasted it by only describing the shape and the color of a piece of chocolate. When I was designing interiors for fashion stores, I would start a project by spending 2 to 3 days just walking around the city, noticing how different environments, spaces, materials, shapes would affect me. A sort of absorbing without thinking. You probably know the feeling of stepping into a room and you feel awkward and uncomfortable for no apparent reason. And then you step into another room and you feel perfectly fine. That's because our experience is based on interaction. So I would use my body and my entire body to do the work. And after a couple of days, I could just sit down and draw up the entire project, letting ideas emerge and take shape from this inner place. When we nourish ourselves and practice mindfulness, we can access our creativity by using the felt sense. The felt sense is that something inside every single one of us, whether we're aware of it or not. It's that something that we often don't put words to because it's so vague and so subtle that it's often that we dismiss it. In the 50s, philosopher Gene Gendlin and psychologist Carl Rogers started researching why some people change in therapy and others stay stuck. And they found that people who do not pause to check in with their felt sense experience would stay stuck. So as a result, Gendlin developed a method to access the felt sense called focusing. It's a process that helps the mind listen to the wisdom of the body. Our bodies process information all the time, but we don't know how to connect with it because it doesn't follow the same logic as our cognitive mind. When I was dealing with my fear around getting cancer, I realized that if I could change my relationship with my body, I could let it guide me. So instead of living in fear, I could live in awareness. It's similar to how I see the relationship we have with food and the relationship we have with creativity. If we focus too much on what instead of why, we get stuck. Because we focus too much on the end result rather than the process of getting there. So let me walk you through how focusing works. Let's all pause for just a moment and take a deep breath in. And on the exhale, just bring your attention into the core of your body and just notice how it feels in there. When you ask yourself, how am I in there right now? And just notice if there's a felt sense of a something. It can be a very fuzzy experience at first. And it can take a while for something to form, but just wait. Maybe it's a felt sense of a swirling or a tingling. Maybe it's tightness or a fullness. Maybe there's a feeling energy of a concern or a longing. As you keep that company, whatever is there, just notice if maybe a word comes or an image. Maybe a scene from a memory or a metaphor. And then ask yourself, What would help me feel just a little bit better right now? Just noticing and acknowledging whatever is there can be enough for a shift to come. So just notice what might change. Our bodies speak to us in ways that children use in play and artists use to create something from nothing. Because something is always there, even when it seems that there isn't. We give our minds so much credit every day, but it doesn't do the work alone. Our bodies is the most important relationship we have. It's the foundation for how we live, thrive, and perform every single day. And we can learn how to be a team, how to be best friends again, the way we were before we lost our inherent connection. That's not a radical idea. What if we could encourage a corporate culture of pausing, where instead of pushing the last minute out of everything, instead we could take just a moment to pause, look, listen, and check in with our felt sense. What new could come? What could change? It isn't something radical. It's just a new relationship with an old friend, waiting to be found again and again and again and again. Thank you.